Welcome back, everybody, to the Growing Band Director podcast. It's an exciting day. We're at episode number 77, and we have my good friend Caitlin Ramsey from Cape Elizabeth Middle School, and one of the icons of our profession, Chip DeStefano from McCracken Middle School. Chip, it's great to have you with us.
Thank you for inviting me to do this. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, so we're going to dive right into a lot of stuff that see how much we can pick your brain and help everybody's band sound better. Caitlin and I know that you focus a lot on tone and pitch. Can you speak to sort of making that a primary focus in your rehearsals?
Well, even from when I just started teaching, tone and pitch have been kind of the top two things on my list in terms of what's going to be the most important. What I want our band sound to be kind of like, what's going to be our trademark sound. And so I just make sure that we focus on that and we work on that every single day, especially since a lot of those exercises that the kids need to do in order to improve their tone and pitch aren't necessarily things they will want to do on their own at home when they're practicing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, long tones are not necessarily the most exciting things to do, but they need to do them. They're really important. And so we spend a lot of time working on that. Specific exercises, the Remington exercise, we do all the time. We do it pretty much all year. We do it in other keys other than just from concert F down to concert B flat. We kind of rotate through a set of keys.
I'm just going to stop you. When you do that, do you start on the fifth of every key when you do it?
So not really. We actually reach. So we have the tonic pitch. So if we're starting on concert F, we'll start every single year on concert F. Mm-hmm. We'll then go from F to E flat, F to E. So it's a little bit backwards, but yes, that's kind of the approach. The approach that we use.
But when you move it into other keys.
Oh, I see what you mean.
You know what I mean?
So let's say, for example, at the beginning of the year, we'll start in concert F. Once we kind of get through our first concert cycle, will be the time we switch keys. And we go to concert E flat. And then we'll start in concert E flat and then go E flat, D, E flat, D flat, E flat, C.
Sure.
Down to the concert A flat. And then once that's feeling pretty good, we'll go to another key and we'll kind of bounce around a little bit. We spend a lot of time on chorales, and working on chorales. And I really like hymnal type chorales in that all the kids have the same rhythm. The notes and rhythms are really, really easy. So what the kids can really focus on is tone and pitch. They can focus on their breathing. They can focus on listening. They can focus on playing more connected and more smooth, and really kind of taking the technique out of the question, taking the note reading and the rhythm reading just out of their mind. They don't have to worry about that as much, and they can really truly focus on the priorities that we've set in terms of those exercises in tone and pitch. And then more recently, and this is kind of more of an influence of some of my Texas friends and Texas mentors, is we spend a lot of time on concert F around the room, and doing those types of exercises as well. Again, just trying to make sure we set our sound and set our tone for the day, and that we sound like how we want to sound before we move away from that note, and trying to copy and paste that to the other stuff that we're doing.
Do you ever find yourself having to convince other teachers who focus on rhythm over tone to kind of come to your side?
I don't know if I ever spend time trying to convince anybody of anything. I mean, they're going to do what they want to do, regardless of what I suggest. But I don't, maybe not rhythm, maybe technique, maybe repertoire, maybe focusing on the repertoire and not necessarily focusing on the fundamentals as much. Those are probably some of the conversations I'm more likely to have with some of my colleagues.
Caitlin, what do you use for chorales?
So I, with my 7th and 8th grader, has used the David Newell Bach and Bach and Beyond, or Bach, whatever it is.
Yep.
And then this year when I heard your clinic at Midwest, I saw the Chorales and Beyond, and I bought that for my kids because, again, it's stripped down. It's much easier. There's less moving parts within it. And having the 3 cycles in each of the keys has been wonderful.
That's great.
Yeah, so that's been a really wonderful resource. I think it's just a little bit more middle school friendly, and also the daily exercises associated with it are a big bonus.
Oh, that's nice to hear. And I know this isn't a commercial for this book, but I'm really proud of it. I'm really proud of it. And Tim and I spent 5 years working on it. I probably used it for another 5 before we actually started working on it. in one shape or form of another, but we're really proud of that book.
So Caitlin's a middle school teacher and you use it. Do you have high school teachers who use it? Teachers who were teaching grade 4, things like that. Is it good for that level too?
I think it is in terms of, again, especially I would think for like a freshman band, freshman sophomore band,
Mm-hmm.
where again you want them focusing on just their fundamentals and not focusing on the notes and rhythms. And also the three chorales in each cycle do kind of progress in difficulty slightly. So the third one is the third one's a Bach harmonization, so that's a little bit more involved rhythmically, especially, and even harmonically. The first two chorales don't have any accidentals for the most part,
Mm-hmm.
unless they're minor. They're pretty diatonic the whole way through.
Forgive my how naive I am. I have not looked at the book. Is it all chorales, or are there? I know it says chorales and beyond. What else is in there?
It's not all chorales. So basically, it starts with kind of a daily routine, which is very similar to what I described to you. So
Mhm.
breathing exercises that I like to do in my rehearsals pretty much every single day. Then we have the pivot scale, which is the Remington exercise in the key, whatever key the section is in. That's the key that the pivot scale is in. And then there is a kind of a past the concert F, past the pitch around the room a little bit, and then a really easy scale arpeggio kind of mini chorale exercise at the bottom of that daily routine. And in my own teaching, I mostly just focus on the breathing, on the pivot scale, and periodically the passing the pitch around the room. We do a lot of that in terms of having individual sections play. Um, my own teaching's kind of evolved a little bit even since I've written the book. We do some other things, of course. But so that's kind of the first page of each key, and
Mhm.
then the next two pages or the next three pages are the chorales. And then the back of the book has some scales. It has some individual practice pages that are specific to each instrument in terms of individual warm-up routines for each instrument, in terms of what those instruments need to be doing every single day while they practice. Kind of a beginner version, and I shouldn't say beginner, more of a starter version, and then a advanced version for kids who are progressing a little bit more. Just kind of a one-page individual warm-up sheet.
When you talk about the routines that you're using, is that for like your sixth, seventh, and eighth graders? Because I know you guys start beginners in fourth and fifth grade. Or those routines look a little bit different for those younger students?
They do, but they're essentially the same routine. So we haven't started fourth grade beginners in a long time. This is the first time we've started fourth grade beginners since COVID hit. And so with those students, not so much. Fourth graders progress a lot slower than even fifth graders do. So with fourth graders, our routine consists of breathing. It consists of concert F. We've just started a couple weeks ago doing the mini scale, the 5-note scale, B flat to concert F, up and down, and a bunch of different scale patterns in that. Doing it in quarter notes, doing it in eighth notes, doing it in thirds, but still just using those 5 notes. And then also rhythm reading. We do rhythm reading with them every time we see them. Our fifth graders are, even as beginners, are a little closer to what our older groups do. So we do the concert F work. And then they actually, just a couple weeks ago, we started working on the Remington with them and making sure they knew all those chromatic fingerings and chromatic notes on that as well. And they're beginners as well, but even if they weren't beginners, our normal fifth grade curriculum has rhythm reading with them every single day too.
I really like the around the room stuff. It forces every kid to be accountable for what they're giving to the ensemble. I saw a small variation of it, which I don't know if you guys have heard about. Dean Neal did this at an honor festival this year, and the kid played F, but then when the other kid came on F, the first kid went down to B flat. So when they came in, they were tuning these open fifths all the time, as a secondary thing, and it was a pretty cool thing to see. And then he did another around the room where the kid just played the half note concert B flat scale, but they'd come in, in a canon, throughout the entire band. It kind of snakes its way through the band, and it was a really cool way to kind of get all those kids that tend to hide a little bit in a basic warm up pattern that you could do as a 5-note scale or an 8-note scale. And those have been some kind of around the room things I've done. What do you do for other stuff we haven't talked about?
For fundamentals,
Yeah.
fundamentals block. Well, we were talking about rhythm, and that is a big part of what we do every day. We've kind of taken the teaching rhythmic logically and slightly modified. We use the Count Me In book, that's same Darcy Voigt Williams, and that is every single day with our kids. And our school is 5 through 8. Our beginners start in 5th grade. And we use Count Me In starting at the beginning and go as far as we can through 5th grade. And then we start it over again at the beginning in 6th grade. And then we start it over at the beginning, essentially the beginning in 7th and 8th grade every year. And that's a big part of our fundamentals block, is that rhythmic piece as well. But the chorales and taking foundation for superior performance, like the Remingtons in there as well. Yeah.
Those 2 books you were talking about, the Williams books, how complicated are the end of those books?
It gets into like 6-8 and cut time. There's less of that, obviously, than everything else, but I'm not doing that with my 5th graders or even my 6th graders.
Okay.
We move slow and then they repeat it. So I feel like we go back and it's attainable, for some students. 16th notes can be a little bit challenging. It's like some reversing those patterns around, but if they're getting it consistently every year, I just feel like the kids are so much more confident in their counting. Their sight reading ability is so much higher than it was before I started using it.
Yeah, that's the system I use too. We don't use that Count Me In book, but we do have her book, the Teaching Rhythm Logically, and so we use her method, and then there's rhythm charts that are with that book as well that we are usually the ones that we use. Caitlin, you mentioned something about starting that book, and then at the beginning of 6th grade, starting at the beginning of that book again, and I think that's really important. That's when we do 4th grade beginners, that's what we do in 5th grade too. We start all the way back at the beginning of whatever books we're using. We start at the beginning of the method book and we do line 1 again, and we just kind of make sure that nobody's slipping through the cracks almost in every way, not just rhythmically, but in tone production, embouchure, and all that stuff. And again, going easier so that they can focus on those fundamentals is important. So one way to go easier is to go back to the beginning of those books.
Yeah,
Or even if I have a kid that's just struggling in general, is like, all right, let's do some review, and we'll go all the way back to line 1. Tell me about how you shape your embouchure. Tell me about how you tongue. If you had to teach your younger brother how to tongue, what would you tell him to do? And just trying to kind of fill those gaps in their knowledge by going back to the beginning, which I think is really important. And if you have to do that with a much older group, let's say you're starting at a brand new job and the band's not where you want it to be, and that 8th grade band is not where you want it to be, and you feel like you got to start them over at the beginning of the book, you just get them a different book. So it's still new and it's still different, but you're starting at the very beginning, which is where they need to be at that moment.
I like that idea of getting them my husband's in a new job this year and in that position, and changing culture a little bit. And that's a really good suggestion, I think. Yeah. The longer I've been teaching, the slower I seem to go with my beginners, and slowed down quite a bit. And with our 6th graders, we start at the beginning of the book, and it builds confidence in the kids too, because there's that summer slide. Like, I'd like to think that all my kids are practicing all summer, but
They're not.
No. So
I think it's also really important that we know that middle school bands can sound amazing. Because I think a lot of places, people hear the middle school and say, oh, they're doing so well, but they really don't sound very good. But that's really just the insistence on the teachers to go slow enough and teach enough technique and tone so that whatever they're playing, they're sounding good.
Yeah, it's worrying about the long term, which is really tough to do when you have a concert in 4 weeks, or you have a concert, or your contest is coming up. But it's really like, what do you want the kids to sound like at the end of the year? What do you want them to sound like in 3 years? And making sure that you're doing the steps between now and then, because tone and pitch, those are really long-term skills. They're skills that you got to work on them every single day for months and years in order for them to develop the embouchure that you want them to have, and the listening skills that you want them to have in order to be able to perform maturely. And so, yeah, it's beyond just going slow. It's just doing it every single day and getting that repetition in, is really important. Thinking long term and not short term. Technique's easy. You can get technique beat into those fingers super easy. I say that a little facetiously, but it's compared to the long term skills that they need to have. technique's really easy to develop.
So how do you compare when you talk about doing things over and over again? You know, the repetition is really important. How do you find ways to alter them so that it's not the same for the kids forever, but you're still assessing the same things and going after that? Like what are some things you can do to change just enough, but not too much that you're missing the mark?
Well, I don't know. One way in which I do it is we change notes, like I described before, and you wouldn't be, but I am often surprised how we'll spend the first 6 weeks of the year on concert F. We'll get it sounding pretty good, especially for the beginning of the year. Everything will be great. It's like, all right, let's switch to concert E flat. And we are literally starting over as if we had never played a note. It's like at the very first day of the year, even though all we've done is gone a whole step lower. Or with our articulation exercise, do it in concert F. Well, let's try it in concert G today. And it's a disaster. So even like changing one little thing sometimes will just kind of make it easy to not feel like we're going through the motions, because it's not very good when we make that little change. And I think a lot of the kids will reflect us. If I'm bored with it, then yeah, they'll be bored with it. But I don't really get bored with it. I love it. And I love working on the skills and getting them to use more air and getting them to listen, and if they're playing, when we do our concert F, we have our horns play the fifth in that concert F. And, if they're really on, we can get that fifth to ring in the room before the horns come in, which is super cool. And just finding excitement in that and getting the kids excited about, some of the little things like that is pretty fun. So I guess that kind of answers your question. We kind of do it fairly similar every single day. The changes we'll make with the articulation exercises, we'll start to speed it up. We'll do some tempo things with that to try to push their articulation speed a little bit here and there. But really, changing keys is my primary way of varying some of the things we do.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I say we do things every day. We don't do the breathing exercises literally every day. I have a set of like 7 or 8 that I rotate through. And then there's some days I just don't feel like it, so we don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about those a little bit?
The breathing exercises are very heavily influenced by the breathing gym stuff and Pat Sheridan and Sam Palafian's their books and their videos and that type of stuff. So and it's also pretty heavily influenced. We had Rex Martin in, this is a while ago when he was still at Northwestern, Rex Martin in to do a clinic with our brass. And so the breathing exercises that he did with the kids are really actually the same breathing exercises that are in our Crowds and Beyond book. And really it's with the breathing, and I'm not going to say this nearly as well as Pat Sheridan describes it. But there's a difference between lung capacity and being comfortably full and comfortably empty when you're playing. And so he kind of describes it as you want to work on both of those. So the workout is when you're trying to get the kids or yourself to kind of get all the way to completely full and completely empty. You'll never play in those ranges of breathing, but you're trying to expand your usable lung capacity by doing that. So that comfortably full has a little bit more air in your lungs, and comfortably empty also has a little bit less air in your lungs, but you're still comfortable, I guess. And so the workout exercises really get the kids to taking what they think is a full breath and then sipping in more air. So he has a 5-15-5 exercise where you breathe in 5 and 8 notes. And then the next 15 counts are holding that air and then sipping when you feel that you can get more air in. And in his workshops, he includes also kind of a stretching component, because as you kind of stretch and relax, it allows you to get some more air in. So 5 and then 15 of sipping, and then exhaling for 15.
Do you
another exercise that kind of works on that as well is, he calls it leaking, and we call it leaking, where you just put your hand up like this. And then again, doing it for 6, and then sip, And then exhaling, we usually go halfway, stop and hold it, and then another halfway. So those are those exercises that we do kind of rotate. We don't do those every single day. And then the other exercises are they call flow exercises, and that's going from comfortably full to comfortably empty and making sure the air is even at all times. And as soon as you start, if you're inhaling and your inhale becomes uneven, you've gone past comfortably full. And same with the exhale. As you're exhaling, if the air becomes uneven, you've gone past comfortably empty. And it's just trying to get the kids to learn where they're comfortably full and comfortably empty are. We do a few different exercises kind of based on what the breathing gym does. However, by the end of the year, we're pretty much just going in for 4, out for 4 twice, in for 3, out for 3 twice, 2s, 1s, and then we're kind of on to our playing and concert F.
So do both of you use the breathing stuff at the beginning of the rehearsal?
With COVID, I got a little nervous about doing all the breathing exercise, and I've put that on hiatus for a bit with masks and everything. When we've done it, I've at least found more success doing it in our smaller groups and our sectionals than doing our full ensemble with like 8th graders at the end of the day. And buy-in, I feel like I can get them in the smaller groups, but it's at the beginning of rehearsal generally. But sometimes the kids walk into the room like, nope, they're not doing this today. Like, just depending on who you see, how they're walking in, and that's generally the beginning. Yep.
Before we leave our discussion on pitch, can the two of you talk about some of the biggest pitch tendencies? I mean, maybe not spending forever on it, but like if you had to give your top 5 sort of pitch tendencies throughout the band instruments, pretend like new directors don't know any of the pitch tendencies beyond their personal instrument. What are some of the biggies?
I mean, clarinet, throat tones, like that's a big one.
Yeah, for sure. Saxophone Ds come to mind, especially since we play concert F every single day, and they're starting on a pitch that's not great for them.
So let's just address both those real quick. Can you talk about the clarinet thing? How do you fix it? What is it and all that?
So throat tones, like when like G, A flat, A, B flat, when they have very few fingers, adding some vent keys or resonance keys, whatever you want to call them, at the bottom. And so they are getting used to how that sounds too, because they're just like trumpet players kicking out on D and C sharp. If you're used to hearing it without that, you think that's right. So getting kind of at the beginning for them to start hearing that difference. And it's going to be different for every kid potentially. Like my 8th graders, actually this week we went through and okay, here's what I've been telling you to put down, but it's going to be slightly different actually for each of you. So maybe you're using, like 1 and 3, or maybe it's the whole bottom hand or whatever it is, slightly different for each kid, depending on their horn. And
Okay. We talk about the saxophone D.
Yeah, they just need to bring it down with their embouchure. It's just a note that they're gonna have to do their entire life.
Do you have any exercises that go between D and C sharp to help them with that break on saxophone?
No, I don't even worry about it. And to be honest, I don't worry about the clarinet break or the oboe break either. It is what it is. It's their instrument, and if they don't know it's hard, if nobody tells them that it's difficult, then it's not difficult. Yeah, I don't worry about it.
Okay. So you talked about low D and C sharp on trumpet. What are the best brands of trumpets to actually get those to move from the very beginning? Because some move quickly and some don't.
I don't know that I'm the person to ask that because our kids are all over the place. So I don't know if Chip.
So you have kids who don't have the third valve side that moves too?
Oh no, they move. They move to different. Like some are more sluggish than others, and it is hard with the beginners, and that's why we grab all of their horns at the beginning before they start playing and work on them a bit. Like I have this one 5th grader who's on, I don't even know what his horn is, and it is harder for him. Make some adjustments. So do you have suggestions, Chip?
No, that's really kind of true, and the quality of some of the student line instruments has definitely deteriorated in the last 2 decades for sure. Without mentioning specific brand names, they're just not the same as they were, and you can actually feel it when you pick up the horn that they're not the same. But yeah, those valves, that third valve's not really working very well is a big problem with the entry level instruments and trumpets. We're really fortunate in our top group to have all the kids on professional horns that the school owns and checks out to them. So it's not an issue with those horns, and they have thumb triggers and third
Yep.
valve slides that work, and it's all good.
And then I've heard from a lot of teachers that if we speak flute, about how the upper register tends to be sharp and airy, right? Can we talk about how we can avoid that?
Well, I've been working a lot this year specifically, like with because during COVID, I taught band online for a year with my beginners, and I've been focusing. My fifth and sixth grade flute classes are not, I think, your typical flute classes. They're a little squirrelier bunch. They're less focused, but we've just been doing so much head joint work, like every day at the beginning of their sectionals, going between lower and higher pitches, like anything that starts to sound not great in their music. Okay, head joints off, and we work on that for like 3 minutes, and it solves that problem. Getting them to adjust here, not trying to overblow everything.
Because the amount of band directors who just say, just use more air. And it's like, no.
That's what I did at the beginning of my
Yeah.
career too. Like I'm a horn player, and that's what I was doing as well when I was playing along with them. And so getting them to, and being able to, almost like a pivot in a way, right? So yeah, again, even with my eighth graders, like something is fuzzy and not sounding great, immediately just onto the head joint, and it solves that problem.
I was talking with John Thompson once from New Trier High School, and he told me that they have a curriculum where they work on. He said the key is to work on the low register of the flutes and get that low register sounding really good, and then do harmonics, and that helps the upper register.
Yep, getting a big. We always talk about like supporting, like with their abs, and getting a big sound on their low register will definitely help with that high register. I mean, you live with a flute player, you probably know more than I do.
I do. I live with 2 flute players, unfortunately. I tried to get her to play something other than flute, and my 6th grader was playing flute. So.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, it's what you mentioned, lip slurs, and those are exercises we do every day, going all the way to the beginner year, and harmonics. You know, that's really it. It does help a lot, and I don't know. I guess the note that bothers me most on flute is C above the staff. That's the one that my kids still struggle with a little bit, but I don't know if we fight it too much, even above that.
What is it that is the issue with the C?
It's just sharp.
Yeah.
Everything's sharp. Everything's always sharp, and everywhere, every instrument, everything.
When in doubt, you're sharp.
Yes, pretty much. Which is, there's a lot of truth to that.
There's a famous trumpet player named Clay Jenkins, who's a jazz trumpet player, and I met him in college, and he was talking to our studio about how everybody on trumpet plays sharp, and I've now realized that's everywhere. But and he said, it's like you're swimming upstream, and if you just lower your setting and you just go underneath just a little bit, that you're in tune, but you don't get tired as much, and it's like you're swimming downstream.
Well, and I think particularly with trumpet, they're playing inefficiently, and if you have them play just a contra B flat, a C, in the staff, and like have them like pull the trumpet away while they're buzzing and playing that note, you'll hear they're not buzzing a contra B flat. They're buzzing higher than that. That's why they're playing sharp.
So there's something I do. I assume you guys do the same thing, where I'll have them play the note, but the mouthpiece is loose in the instrument, and they're playing it, and then they just slowly back it off, and you can hear the pitch go right up, and then get them to do enough so that they're buzzing the right note, and it just centers the pitch. Yeah,
we do a lot of pitch bends with our brass too, half step. Da 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 da. It's a brass gym exercise where they do the half note with their fingerings, and then they bend it with their embouchure. And that helps a lot too, because at the end of that exercise, they have to center that pitch and put it where they want it to be on purpose.
Do you use the burps?
I don't. No, but that's probably more just a reflection of me not using them when I was growing up. But no, I don't use them.
They as a trumpet player, they are pretty cool. I mean, we don't use them right now, so I'm a hypocrite, but they are really cool because you kind of feel like you're playing the trumpet even though you're buzzing.
Yeah.
So
we use we get those bubble tea straws and use them on mouthpieces a lot. We do a lot of pitch bending with kids, like stuff and those kind of top out at C in the staff, and they sound pretty terrible. But when they're having like our 5th and 6th graders trouble with something in their music, and we'll go to those, and there's just it's more, and then they go back on their horn like, oh, this is so easy. I'm like, yes, that's what you need to do when you're practicing at home, to try to model that as well.
And a great thing is to take that mouthpiece pitch and just have them buzz like with the Remingtons when the woodwinds are playing, so they have that pitch to match all the time.
Yeah, for sure. And I know there's a whole school of brass playing pedagogy that's really kind of against mouthpiece buzzing, but
Really?
my growing up going to Northwestern has been very much mouthpiece buzzing is really important. Rex Martin would say that buzzing the mouthpiece connects the brain to the music. But for me, I've never had a kid play something, buzz it, and then play it again, and it not be better the second time after they buzzed it.
Right.
Yep.
Always, every time.
I mean, I would drive Clark Terry to the airport after the UNH Jazz Festival, and he'd just warm up on his face. He didn't need the mouthpiece. He'd do it. He'd take a nap and then do it after drinking a Pepsi, and he's like, "I'm good to go. I can play my gig." Of course, he was Clark Terry, and I'm not. All right, so then can we jump to, I think, another huge key? We talked about fundamentals and pitch and tone, a huge key to great programs, and that's the pacing of rehearsals when you're on the podium or when you're just in rehearsal in general. So I assume you've had a lot of student teachers and you have a lot of advice to give us around how quickly or not quickly to pace your rehearsals.
Yeah, my pace is really fast, and and I say that with the caveat of I really believe that the kids reflect us. And so if they're bouncing off the walls, my pace is not really fast. If they're a little more squirrely than I want them to be, I'll actually slow down a little bit and try to get them to like
Agreed.
come to me and focus on me. But all things being equal, our rehearsals start at 7:15 in the morning. So my kids are usually not bouncing off the walls that early in the morning. So I kind of have to hit them with a ton of energy to get them to do what we want to do that morning. And so I just move really quickly. I try not to talk a lot. Um, and I just try to not only just kind of keep them playing more than I'm speaking, but also just kind of keep the energy up. And we don't, if something's not working, we'll work on it for a little bit and then we'll just go on to the next thing and continue attacking that problem that next day.
How do you, what's some advice you have for younger teachers who, they're conducting their band, either whether they're student teaching or they're in their first job, and they don't know what to say when they cut the band off? Because obviously the rule is like, have a bunch of things that you want to say when you cut the group off so you can keep the pacing going. What are some ways people can develop that?
Well, for me and what I do, and I got this from Cindy Lansford. It's really, if you're really not sure, you just got to isolate something and then fix it. So if you do 8 measures and you're not sure what you don't like, then have the woodwinds play it, isolate that, and then whatever's there, isolate and fix it. And then you hear the brass and fix whatever's wrong with the brass, and then you hear the percussion and what's wrong with the percussion.
And
And
fixing doesn't just mean notes and rhythms. Fixing means
correct.
all the things.
So it's taking, so you should, before you even step on that podium, you need to have a mental image. You need to be able to hear in your head what you want it to sound like. And then you take what they do and you compare it to what's in your brain. And that's what I mean by fixing it. Is what do you need to change from what they're doing to match what you want in your head? And it's more often than not has very little to do with notes and rhythms, and it's actually everything else. I don't know if I have anything more to say.
Well,
Okay.
so at Midwest this year, watching you work with your group, and I think you saying students reflect the teacher, but like how calm your students were, but how quick they were to respond to everything. My husband was sitting next to me and was just like, "Oh my gosh, I talk too much in my rehearsal." Like and how kind of you build that from the younger students too, because I imagine that pacing has to look quite a bit different from your
It
beginners
does.
all the way to your highest level group.
And once I settled down in that session, because I was really flustered and nervous at the beginning. Once it settled, that was pretty representative of what a normal rehearsal kind of looks like. Now they were a little bit better behaved for sure too, because there's a bunch of people in the audience, but that was kind of just a normal rehearsal for us as well. With the younger kids, there might be a little bit more downtime in between things. So they're on, but then when we switch pieces, we give them a little bit more time.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm trying to, it does feel different for sure, because we just can't go, they can't keep up if we went that fast. At least I don't think they can.
It's just important to be able to read the kids in the room on that day.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think all of our groups are probably a little bit different as well, but in some ways similar. It all kind of builds on itself a little bit to get to where we want it to be. And I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to like describe how it happens, but it just kind of like it's kind of the culture of the program a little bit too.
Do you have any suggestions for, folks working on their pacing, things that they can do?
Well, when I'm working with student teaching, there's a couple things we work on. One is sometimes I'll just flat out time them from when they stop until when they start up again, and it's not even it's just like saying, this is how long you're talking versus this is how long they're playing. What do you think? And more often than not, it's like it's backwards. Is it needs to be different.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think with younger teachers, it's not even necessarily how long they're talking. It's just how many times they're repeating themselves within that. They said what they needed to say in the first 7 seconds, but then they said it like 4 or 5 different ways or 4 or 5 different times or literally repeated themselves. And it was the next 40 seconds that weren't necessary.
And then you're
Um,
training the kids to, you know, not react with the first
well, yeah, and to
instruction too.
not listen the first time. Absolutely.
Also, in ways to get kids to play more, even just recording rehearsals. I know we can talk about that a little bit later too, but like the video recording, and then you watch your own thing and realize how much you're talking. And then I have some people who say a lot that kids can fix a lot of the stuff themselves with more reps. So like, how do you balance that? Well, let's play it again, or here's one instruction, let's play the whole piece again, or like, how do you do that? Because obviously, if you play it again, a lot of times, depending on the maturity of the kids, they'll be able to fix a lot of stuff that you would fix too. So how do you balance picking stuff apart and fixing it and letting them play a lot?
Now, I do think that comes with experience some, and just kind of and knowing your kids too, in terms of, all right, if I don't stop and fix that, he's going to be fine, she's going to be fine, or versus if I don't stop and fix that, they're going to be playing it at the concert and I'm going to be really upset that I didn't stop and fix
Mm-hmm.
that. So some of that I think comes with experience of just kind of knowing the rep, especially if you've done the piece before, you kind of know it'll fix itself.
Mm-hmm.
And then also knowing your kids. Um, and I don't like to repeat just for the sake of repeating, for
Mm-hmm.
sure. Although if I feel like I need to, what I'll normally say is, let's just do that again. It's going to be better because it's the second time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and kind of telling them, yes, we're just repeating this, but we're repeating it because it needs to be better than it was the first time. I don't even have anything to tell you. I'll also sometimes, if it just kind of, again, I'm just kind of reading the room, there'll be plenty of times where we'll play something, it doesn't sound very good, and I'll just say, look, guys, you have to play better. And we go back and then they play it better, and then I stop and say, is me telling you to play better good teaching? And they'll be like, no. And it's like, so why did it work? And it's really because you weren't doing what you're supposed to be doing the first time we did it. And just kind of, trying to get them to take a little bit more ownership.
I think that's a big one. Like
Yeah.
this Pat, we have a concert in the middle of May, and they're like, you guys know this music, and you're playing it, and you're playing it in the same room, kind of at the same time, but you're not listening to each other. Like you need to start working as an ensemble together. It's not me doing it; it's you guys doing it. And sometimes just that, little short pep talk resolves those issues.
For me, sometimes I'll do, if I want to do it again, but I want to give them something to think about, I'll take, some people use the listening levels. Like level one is listening to yourself. Level two is person next to you in front of you. Level three is like two people away or whatever. And think about where you're listening and do it again. It's funny when you just remind them to listen, it's just like instantly better.
Yeah, for sure.
So I keep going back to your clinic at Midwest this year because it was really impactful for me. And I actually emailed you this fall about your schedule because I was looking at kind of the stats on McCracken and the size of the school, which is very similar to my school, and the number of kids in your band program. And we're looking at building another new schedule and was really curious. We see these bands from the Midwest, these big programs, and from Texas, and we make assumptions, I think, about what those programs look like. And then you told me about your schedule. I was even more in awe of what you're able to do with your program. So you can talk about a little bit about what that looks like and how you're able to do all that you are within that schedule.
Yeah, I probably answered that email by saying I'm going to tell you, but don't do it. Because I do think and I've said this to many an administrator, that I think we're successful in spite of our schedule. I don't think we're successful because of it. Um, but all of our large group rehearsals meet outside the school day, before school and after school. Um, and there was a time where some of our stuff would take place during the kids' lunch recess at the elementary school, but we eliminated that. That was a battle that wasn't really worth fighting, and we got more time when we moved it after school anyway. And then during the day, we have a class pullout program where the kids leave what other class they would normally be in, and they come into their lessons. And we rotate through the different times of the day, so they're not missing the same class every single week. And that works because I have just really supportive colleagues, and the other teachers in both buildings are really supportive and work with it, even though I'm sure it's just a tremendous inconvenience to have kids missing from their class because they're with me. But the things that are nice about what we have is our top group meets virtually every single day. So they're before school every morning from 7:15 to 7:55. They go a little bit longer on Thursdays. They go to 8:10. We kind of manipulate an advisory period to get some more time there. I said every morning, but it's Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, not on Wednesday. And then Tuesday after school, I see the kids from 2:10 to 3:30. So we have almost 90 minutes. We have 80 minutes with them after school. And then on Wednesdays, in the last couple of years, it's been Tuesday or Wednesday. That's when we see the kids in sectionals, and I see them in like instrument groupings with the top group. For the longest time, it was just me here. That was the only full-time band director. We now have two full-time band directors, and what makes that really nice is the second band now has the identical schedule as the top band. So they have a lot more contact time than they did when it was just me. That Tuesday rehearsal for them only goes to 3, so it's a 50-minute rehearsal. Those are younger kids mostly, but kind of the same thing. And their lesson groups are much smaller. Their lesson groups are usually 2 kids, 3 kids during the day through the class pullouts.
You're
And
talking
then
about, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, go ahead. Then I was just going to then say, so that's the middle school, the top 2 bands at the middle school. And then our 5th grade band rehearses Monday and Wednesday after school for an hour. And then they get a half an hour lesson during the day, once a week. And then our 4th grade meets after school just Thursday for 50 minutes. And they get a half an hour lesson once a week as well.
So for pullouts, obviously you have to have really supportive colleagues, which is wonderful. And administration, and talking about the before and after school, is that parents dropping off and picking up? Is there school transportation? How does that look?
It is for the morning rehearsals. Actually, for the top band, it's all that. Yes, there's not a late bus or anything. For our younger kids, there is some bus home support. For sure, for our 4th grade, there's not much for the 5th grade. The 5th grade doesn't rehearse at our elementary school because there's really no good place to rehearse. So we bus them over to the middle school for those 2 rehearsals each week. And then if they're in the kind of the after school program, the supervision program after school, we'll bus them back to that. But there's no bus home for that.
Can you talk a little bit about maybe building the culture where, families are happy to do that and kids are excited to be after school? And
Well, I don't know if they're excited to be after school.
well,
Yeah,
but they want to be part of the program.
they want to be
That's how
part of
they
the
are.
Yeah,
Right.
they want to be part of the program. Yeah, in a lot of ways, that culture was already here when I started. Here. Oh, there's my lights. Hold on a second.
As he's doing that, it's important that everybody knows whatever you have to do, you just make it work in your school. You're talking about a not great schedule, and obviously you've made a great program out of it.
Yeah, so I don't. So it was kind of here when I got here already. My predecessor was here for 33 years. He was a really terrific teacher and really great at building community support. He lived in district. He was Mr. Music in Skokie. And so a lot of that was actually already here when I got here. And I wonder, I don't know how to answer your question. The kids want to be part of the program. and they want to be part of something good. And I guess I've never really worried about anything other than that. I mean, it's when we rehearse. So if they're going to be in band, that's what they have to do. And if they can't do it, then they can't be part of our program. Not, vindictively, it's just, you can't pretend to be in band. So, if you're in band, you're at rehearsal.
I have some kids who pretend to be in band. I'm just joking. What's your concert schedule? How often do you perform?
So our first concert's in October. Our second concert's in December. And then we have a little bit longer preparation cycle going into kind of contest season, application recording season. And then so our next performances will be in March, where we'll have a pre-contest concert, and then state contest at the end of April. Super State, if we get invited to Super State at the beginning of May, and then our spring concert mid-May, with various things kind of thrown in between. So we did the stuff at Midwest this year, so we had that in December. We also played at our state conference in January, so we had that performance in January. The Super State application deadline is usually mid-February, so we have to get a recording session in there, and then we've been recording for a Midwest performance application too, so that's usually due the second Friday in March. So we got to get a recording session in there too, and so there's a couple stretches where it's really busy, and it feels like we're doing a lot, and there's a couple stretches where it feels like we have some time to actually work on things.
I feel like there's a lot of teachers, I'm just speaking from my own personal experience, a lot of teachers who perform twice a year, and I'll just speak to the high school level because that's kind of what I know more. I purposely try to have a concert about every 5 to 6 to 7 weeks of rehearsals, because I've just found that whether or not we have 3 months or we have 6 weeks, they're going to be ready right before the concert. So I found that I would rather do 3 pieces that are a little bit easier than doing 3 that are a little bit harder, but I have twice as many concerts. So it's worked well for us.
Yeah, and along with that is changing repertoire in between those performances too. And yeah, absolutely. The kids make their most progress in that first week that you start the new rep, and the week right before the concert. So if you can squish the stuff that's in between that, I think they do end up actually getting better faster by adding more performances.
We did the one we added that was big was the first week of February, because that's like middle of nowhere land for a lot of people. And to get people liking it, I did like a movie concert. So I chose like 3 arrangements that I thought were really good music, and then I had kids do custom movies to those arrangements that are clips from the movies, and then they played it over it, and the parents obviously loved it. But more importantly, they had another concert to prepare for.
Yeah. I have a really good friend who does, he just calls them in progress concerts. And they'll have those 3 weeks in. Like, so they'll start new rep, and then, 3-4 weeks into the preparation cycle, they're nowhere near being ready to do it. They'll give a concert, and you'll give in progress concerts. I'll do
Interesting.
kind of stealing from him a little bit. I'll do sneak preview stuff if we've started working on something and maybe we're playing it way under tempo, or it's not quite ready to put in front of the parents. However, they really need to put it in front of the parents so that they A, practice more, and B, kind of get a sense of how much they need to do to get it to be where we need it to be. I'll just call it a sneak preview and ask parents to not record it and put it on YouTube, and just keep it just between us. But we'll just call it a sneak preview. I've done that a couple times. That's been pretty effective.
Do you do the entire concert or the entire piece, or like parts of the piece, or under tempo?
So this year I knew we were going to do choreography at our state conference, and I knew we were going to play it on our Midwest app. So I knew we were going to be on it for a long time. So we started it later than I would have for our winter concert. And so we just performed, I think we performed the first third of it. And I just, told them what we were doing, and we're only going to do the first bit because that's all we've learned. And here's a sneak preview of what you're going to hear in a couple months from now.
It's a cool idea.
It's my understanding that McCracken band is not graded. Can you talk a little bit about that and what you might do to still assess students and how that works in your program.
So that used to be the case, but that's not the case anymore. So
Okay.
we actually are graded now. Our entire district switched to standards reference grading. I don't even know when that was. It was 6 or 7 years ago, and when they made that switch, they asked us to be a part of it. But yeah, for the first long time, there were no grades in the program. But at the same time, they're always being assessed in sectionals and small groups and lessons and in chair placements and honor band auditions and you know ensemble auditions, all that stuff. Solo and ensemble contests, they're constantly being assessed and helped. It was just never going on a report card.
Do you do chair placements for all of your bands, or is it just your like upper level?
We do it for all of our bands except for our beginner bands.
Okay. Is
Yeah.
that a rotating like throughout the year?
I
Chair placement
I just
changing,
do it.
or
I just do it once.
just once? Okay.
But I'll also kind of, I don't even know the right way to describe it. They're not necessarily like permanent-ish. If things need to kind of get moved around a little bit for us to, I don't even know what I'm saying. I'll move things around. We'll do like part rotations if we have to do part rotations or stuff like that too.
Or if your first player isn't practicing as much as your second player, like
Then the solo will go to the second player. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, so we do the placement at the beginning of the year, and it's actually their very first day. I don't do it the first day of school. I do it the second day of school, and it's to try to keep the kids practicing over the summer, really, and to try to get them to take lessons over the summer too to prepare.
And it's not based on where they were last year. It's based on where they are right
No,
now.
it's a clean slate audition. And so we have quite often we'll have younger kids leap over older, more experienced kids just because they took it more seriously. Yeah, that's my warning every spring.
Same.
It's like, and it'll happen because you did it. You did it last year. But
And when they're doing those placements, what are they auditioning on?
so I've actually the older and more experienced I've gotten, I've made those audition packets smaller, and a little less intimidating. But it's usually just a portion of whatever their district band audition is going to be. So it's a scale. The scale sheet it's 7 major scales and they're relative melodic minor scales. It's just a scale sheet that the Illinois Music Education Association junior bands use. And then they go through a rotation of etudes every 3 years, so we use that etude as well. And then the articulation exercise we use, I include as part of the audition. And I think I'm going to have some sight reading next fall. I usually don't, but I might have just some something really simple sight reading, grade 1-ish.
Just to show that it's important.
Yeah, for sure. I think more when we do it for our like band placements, it's just to make sure, that they're actually reading music and they can read music. But yeah, I don't know.
Other than chair placements, and what are some other ways to motivate students to practice? I know that's always a concern for teachers, is trying to balance kind of that intrinsic and extrinsic and getting them to put in the time outside of the band room.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with ownership of the program and making sure that the kids feel ownership. And so I think there's a few things that I do to try to keep kids motivated and keep them practicing. One, more than anything, is to make sure they have a reason to be practicing. And if we kind of look at our year, over the summer, they have their chair test. In the fall, there is kind of honor band season. And so they're preparing either for our district junior band or the All Illinois junior band, the kind of the statewide honor band. And then once November hits, we start working on solo and ensemble stuff, and all of our kids are required to play a solo for solo contest. So that takes us into February. For the kids that are in the top group at that point, we're in contest season, so we're working on our contest rep, preparing for Super State. And for our younger kids, they're preparing their placement auditions for the following year. you know, and then the cycle kind of repeats itself um, as we go through there. So I really try to have a reason for them to be practicing. We do practice logs for sure, especially with their younger students. And mostly, we collect them and we make sure they're doing them and turning them in. We're really not even that concerned about the number of minutes that are on it unless it's like horrendous.
Mm-hmm.
So we do that in conjunction with just kind of regular playing assignments, playing tests type of thing. And I'm much better at doing those with the younger kids than I am with the older kids, with the kids in our top group. I don't like doing like the weekly recordings and sending them in. And what I tell them is like, you don't want to do it and I don't want to listen to it. Just because it takes so much time and so much energy, and I'd rather, in some ways, I'd rather just be preparing for a rehearsal and listening to our rehearsal recordings from the previous night and
And
that
obviously,
type of stuff.
what's good about it is you're holding the kid accountable for how they sound, and they have to be prepared to be able to play it. They can't lean on somebody else. But you're right; if you do it too much, it's just a pain for everybody. So,
Right.
Can you talk? I know practice logs can be a divisive topic among band directors.
I am on team practice log.
Yeah. So we do it with our beginners. What does a practice log look like? Is it more like talking? Like we try to do it so like here we give them like a practice menu. Here are the things you should be working on, and here's like a goal minute, and that's ultimately what we don't care about. But
Yeah.
some people have them write, very clearly what they worked in within their music. So what does that look like for you?
So for our younger kids, we separate those two things out. So they have objective sheets, which are basically a series of benchmarks and um, kind of goals that we want them to achieve for whatever period of time that objective sheet is for. So that's kind of what they should be working on, is the material that's on that objective sheet. And then the practice log is really kind of simply a log where they're keeping track of the number of minutes that they practiced on that particular day. For our older kids, it's it's not super formal, but there's, this is the number of minutes I practiced today. This is what I worked on. And the kids that really buy into it and they're really specific about they worked on, I think it's really beneficial too. And then there's kids that kind of just, scroll 20 minutes every day or whatever. And then they write something in the first line and they write ditto all the way down for the rest of it. That's not as effective. And I don't necessarily even believe them when I see that chart.
So that happens in your program too.
It happens in our program too. Yeah.
Caitlin, can you speak a little bit about the IMMA and suitability testing that you do to kind of get kids started well with beginners?
Yes. So in our, so we start band in 5th grade. So in 4th grade, we're very fortunate. Our general music teacher gives all of our 4th graders, they do the Gordon MMA assessment. And then I go in and meet.
For people who don't know what that is, what is
So
that?
it's intermediate measures of audiation, I believe. So it's a tonal and rhythmic aptitude test. So it's not based on like the skills that they have, but their musical aptitude. So we use that in conjunction. I meet with every kid and we do some instrument fittings, and every program does it differently. And this is what we've found that works for us. So I meet with every kid. They try a trumpet mouthpiece, a trombone mouthpiece, a flute head joint. We do a little bit of like a coordination exercise with them. And I kind of use all of that to come up with some recommendations for instruments. They can still pick whatever they want. We do kind of limit numbers in some sections. Like this year, 30% of the 4th grade class wanted to play clarinet for next year. So we had to,
It's a good problem to have.
Yeah, it was and it wasn't, but it all worked out. There's a lot more trombone players now. So that's kind of how we do. I wanted something that would help with instrument balance, would also be a way to promote our program, because some families, they're like, never thought my kid would be doing band, but you sent home this thing that said they'd be really good at playing a brass instrument.
How do you take their score for tone and rhythm, and how does that turn into you should play the flute or you should play the clarinet or percussion?
So the rhythmic and tonal, I'm really mostly just looking for brass and percussion. So I want a pretty high score for both rhythm and tonal for our percussionists. And then I'm looking at a higher tonal score for our brass players. And then with a little bit higher rhythmic score for the low brass players and independent. So I kind of utilize that. With flutes, we're really looking for those kids like can they make a sound and make a nice sound. And I do talk to the kids and about like finger dexterity because they do recorders, and they're like, that's not working out for you on recorder. I don't think that's going to be working out for you on the flute either. So it's really for brass and percussion primarily, or the scores on that, and then it's just mouthpiece. And I feel like with woodwinds, for the most part, unless there's something physically happening with their face, they can do this. So that's
because the likelihood of them being good at the trumpet, if they can buzz pretty quickly, is higher. Right. And then I know one thing that my wife asks is, or says on the form, is if your kid is a worker, it's okay if you choose one that's they're not going to be very good at. But if your kid is going to like just quit with something, choose something they'd be good at quickly.
Yes. So trying to find good fits, and there are plenty of kids who sign up for different things than we recommend
because the flute is pretty.
Yes. Or it's really small and fits in their backpack. Yeah. But it helps with that instrument balance too, and we also get them scheduled for the next year, because when I first started my job, there were not any sectionals because they just came in by homeroom. So that was my first kind of way to try to problem solve that is, okay, we need to schedule them when they're in 4th grade and at the end of 4th grade. So Chip, do you do instrument fittings? Do you have a specific sign up process?
Yeah, yes, we do. And we, pre-pandemic, we would actually we do an instrument fitting with every single kid in 4th grade, whether or not they were interested in being in band. And it kind of, for the same thing you kind of described, is I know for sure that we got several kids who weren't initially interested in being in band, but once they held an instrument and once they made the sound, they were kind of hooked.
Yeah.
And so I know we got several kids that way. Last year we didn't do fittings at all. Our state and our community was pretty conservative when dealing with the pandemic, so it didn't feel like the right thing to do. And then this year we did do instrument fittings. However, we only did it with kids who signed up for band. So they signed up for band, and then we did the instrument fittings on those students. But for the first, I don't know, at least maybe the first 10-ish years, I just had kids sign up. We demonstrate the instruments, and I just had them sign up, and they pick their instruments, and then I just dealt with the kids who either physically couldn't play an instrument for whatever other reason, and then we would make the switch.
I know somebody who they would play the flute and they'd play it really badly for those demos, and then they'd get like some pro trombone player to come in, so everybody wanted to play the
I do that with the saxophone. Talk about how heavy it is, and
you don't really want to play this instrument,
unfortunately, for my coworker who's a saxophone player.
Chip, as we wrap up, again, we appreciate you being here very much. Is there a message for band directors who are out there who are listening to this as they're driving on their way into their job, and whether they're new directors or in the middle of the career, kind of like we are, or older directors, what do you got?
Oh, okay. That's a little more open than I thought you were going to give me.
It's open.
Our jobs are really hard work. To do them right. They're a lot of work. And here's the message. And this is from one of my sessions, is that actually, and from a book chapter that I wrote, is, kids are not going to work any harder than we work. They're not going to care any more than we care. And they're not going to practice any more than we prepare for our rehearsals. And so I do think that my message, whenever I have an opportunity to speak, is that kids are going to reflect us, and they're going to reflect us both in the micro of our individual rehearsals, but also just kind of in the macro of our entire programs, the culture of our programs. The way we approach our jobs is going to be the way our students are going to approach them being in our programs, and so it's really important that we provide that model for our kids. Because they're gonna reflect us.
I think that's perfect advice, because a lot of, especially younger teachers, are worried more about a lot of other things rather than working hard and getting good at their job first.
We sincerely appreciate you taking your valuable time and listening to the Growing Band Director podcast. Your students are very lucky to have a band director like you. If you have any suggestions for episode topics or think you have an area of expertise to share on a show with us, please reach out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your band director friends to subscribe as well. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening to The Growing Band Director. See you next week.